Welcome everyone to Bedtime Mysteries with Andreajohnsonbooks. I am Andrea Johnson, your host for this evening, and the purpose of this nightly interlude is to help my audience go to bed with a simple thought. Who is it? My short bedtime mysteries will leave you with many questions. You will always end the evening with something to ponder or decipher. Tonight, we continue with part 3 of Parallel Reflections. A family man living an everyday normal life wakes up into something that cannot be explained. What has always been the same is now in question, as this very man finds himself the primary suspect in a multiple homicide investigation. In our previous segment, Charles Thompson witnessed something that holds a man's life in the balance. But there are two sides to a story. Which one did he see? Our story now moves on to the object of interest, Brad Foster himself. As all eyes are now on him, there's only one thing left for him to do.
Brad Foster sat very still, his hands cupped in front of him as they lay on the table. The tension was thick as a rope, as the silence in the room was met with an occasional indrawn breath of impatience. He was in the interrogation room. The assigned lawyer from the state sat stoically next to him, while two detectives sat on the other side. There was a tape recorder in the center of the table, currently taking in every sound and nervous movement from the twitchy spectators. They waited for him to speak. Even the lawyer was pensively watching him as everyone focused their gaze on the most wanted man in the state. Brad kept his head lowered. His emotions were numb, and his heart was a frozen cube inside his chest. But even in his detached, frazzled condition, there was one thing that was very clear to him. It was the only thing that kept him going. He didn't do it. He didn't kill his family. We need you to tell us what you did the last 24 hours before the murders. The lead detective spoke up briskly. Not that it matters. We've got all the evidence to put you away for a very long time. Brad knew the detective was trying to bait him, and even the lawyer remained quiet, giving him a sympathetic yet condemning look. Brad shut them all out and began to think back to 3 days ago, when his life was normal, before the nightmare. His emotionless voice began to speak, and everyone immediately became entranced. I was at work as I was every day of my life for the past 20 years. I've been a mail clerk for Clifton Waterworks for 15 years. I was only promoted to supervisor just 5 years ago. Brad spoke of his company, whom he dedicated his life to, the largest manufacturer of bottled water in the state. He continued calmly. There was nothing different about my day except for one thing. I did something I never did before. Brad suddenly lifted his head for the first time and looked at the lead detective, his gaze steady and clear. I usually have the Stage 1 clerks deliver the mail, but I was in a hurry to get home, and everyone was out on deliveries. So I decided to take the letter addressed to the CEO to the corporate offices myself. I took the elevator to to the 23rd floor, but no one was there. Everyone was gone for the day, so I was going to leave the letter under the CEO's door. But as I walked down the hall, I passed a closed conference room. I could hear voices inside. Brad's eyes twitched slightly. I figured someone could show me to the CEO's office, so I knocked and then opened the door. Brad kept his eyes on the detective as his hands started to tremble. All of the board members were present. There were dozens of bottled water on the table in front of them, and men in white lab coats were pouring green liquid into the bottles, and it was dissolving into the water, turning clear as if it was never there. There was a man in a white lab coat talking in front of the room, in front of a white board that had a graph on it. He said to them, "This will cause people to be dependent on our water. It is undetectable in the bloodstream." Brad's throat convulsed as he continued. I tried to back out of the room before anyone saw me, but I'd stumbled into the door, and they all turned towards me. They stared at me, silently, never said a word. Brad finally lowered his head. I went home, but nothing happened, and the next day no one said anything to me when I came into work, so I thought everything was fine. Now Brad looked at everyone in the room, his eyes red and crazed with fury. But then I went to sleep. When I woke up, my whole life was completely over. Don't you see what happened here? I was set up. I've been framed to cover up something I shouldn't have seen. The detective finally spoke up, smirking cruelly. "That's a good story, Foster. So let me ask you this. If you were set up by the largest corporation in the state, then how is it it's you we have on film committing the murders? Can you explain that?" Brad lowered his head in defeat. It was the only thing he couldn't. They'd shown him the footage. It was him killing his own family. He could only think of one response. He looked up at the lead detective again, his eyes steady. "Did anyone check the window?"
I hope you enjoyed tonight's segment of Bedtime Mysteries with Andreajohnsonbooks, and I hope it left you with a question. If Brad is being set up as he claims, then how can he explain being caught on camera? And what is it about the window that he insists everyone should take notice of? Have you figured it out? Tune in next week for the continuation. Bedtime Mysteries can be seen Monday nights at 8 o'clock Central Standard Time. Please like my page on Facebook at Andreajohnsonbooks. You can also follow me on Twitter at AuthorJohnson78 or on Instagram at Andrea the Creative Author. You can also visit my site at Andreajohnsonbooks.com. I wish you a good night, sleep tight, and don't leave your windows open tonight.